Fantasy Network. I'm your host, Greg Ambrosius, and I'm flying solo today. You know, it's hard to believe, but this is the 20th anniversary of the National Fantasy Baseball Championship. I mean, think about that 20 years of the National Fantasy Baseball Championship. What started out as a very simple idea by myself has changed into really the premier contest in the fantasy baseball industry. I really do think it's changed our industry and it's changed my life as well. I'm really proud of what we've accomplished in these first 19 years. In fact, in the first 19 years, we've awarded over $82 million in prize money. Think about that. $82 million in prize money we've given to people in the industry and customers. We went from 231 total teams in 2004 NFBC to almost 20,000 last year. The first year of the NFFC in 2004, I think we had like 326. We had over 21,000 this year. So over 40,000 teams in baseball and football alone last year. So what I like to do right now is celebrate 20 years of the NFBC. In fact, I've got Spotted Cow for all of you people who know what this is. It's a Nuclearis Brewing Company. It's only brewed in Wisconsin. You can only buy it in Wisconsin. Damn Minnesota people come here all the time and want to have it. So grab a beer. Join me if you will. We're going to look back at our great history and we'll have a beer and look at history. All right. So celebrate with me with a beer and let's go down memory lane. Oh, yeah, that's good. Derek, you know you'd cross the border to get that. That's for sure. All right. To get to know the NFBC's history, you have to know my history. I mean, I'm somebody who was always involved with sports, played a lot of sports, just wanted to be in sports. You know what it's like when you had that English teacher who would ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? For me, it was always sports. I didn't know what it was going to be, but it was going to be sports, you know? I mean, my dad was a bank president. I was good at numbers. Mrs. Banky, I know you still think I went to school for accounting, but I did not go to a school for accounting. I did not want to sit at a desk job and do numbers. To me, I used to listen to the Bucks on the radio all the time. Eddie Doucette was my favorite announcer. I wanted to be Eddie Doucette. So I went to college for radio and TV, and I found out that I had a face for radio and a voice for TV, which in other words was I wasn't very good at either one. And so by my junior year, I changed my major. I got into journalism and photography. I became the sports editor of the campus newspaper, the photography editor, and that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be in newspapers. I was no doubt that that was my love. I got a job right out of college as a sports editor of a twice weekly down by Lake Geneva. If anybody's familiar with Wisconsin, you know it's just a beautiful area of our state. And then I got a job as a sports editor of a daily newspaper near Wisconsin Dells, another beautiful, beautiful area. So 7 years I was working in newspapers. And after 7 years, I was making $13,500 and living in my own mobile home. I'm not complaining. That was living. That was the life, man. 13,500. And I owned my own mobile home. So it was cool. But in April of 1989, I was watching the NFL draft. In fact, the Packers had the second pick. We took Tony Mandrich. What a pick that was, right? No Barry Sanders, no Deion Sanders. It was Tony Mandrich. And my brother-in-law called me about that to talk about that. And he said, hey, by the way, I saw an ad in the Green Bay Press Gazette today, and they're looking for an editor of a rotisserie baseball magazine. I was like, what? And I had been playing rotisserie baseball since 1986, 87, and I applied for that job right away. And when I got there, they asked if I had played. I said, of course I did since 1986. And they're like, wow, really? You've been playing a long time. So they were impressed with me. By the time I got home, they already had offered me the job and I took it. I was getting out of newspapers and coming to the magazine. Now that was in June. I started June 5th of 1989, but they decided they weren't sure they were going to do the magazine. They wanted me to check to see how many advertisers were out there. Uh, and they just thought maybe I could work in the baseball card magazine for a while. I started as assistant editor to Baseball Cards magazine. Anybody who was in the baseball card industry, that really was the premier magazine back then. And I became the assistant editor there. I looked to find advertisers. I looked in the Sporting News. I looked in Baseball America. Man, it was tough to find any. But we had enough. In October, Bob Lemke, my publisher, said, let's go forward with it. We're going to do three pre-draft magazines. So our first magazine went to press in December of 1989. I think it was 1990 was cover dated. Anybody who's been around a while, this was the cover. We had regional covers, Howard Johnson, Will Clark, Ryan Sandberg, and it bombed. I mean, it really struggled the first year. We had 155,000 circulation. We sold 25% of the first issue, which was not good. Baseball Cards magazine had a circulation of 330,000. We sold 75 to 80%. It was just a cash cow. And so we did 6 issues that year. We tried to do them in season, which was disastrous. People didn't want a magazine during the season. And so at the end of 1 year, it was pretty precarious. Baseball Weekly came out in 1991, and it convinced us we're not doing in-season magazines. So we decided to do just 4 magazines in 1991. We again struggled with baseball, and it was not looking good. In fact, in 1992, the CFO came to us and said, if you can't sell 33% of this first baseball issue, that's the end with this magazine. I mean, 3 years, we're giving it 3 years, but you've got to sell 33%. In 1992, Kit Kiefer also left Krause Publications, so they made me the editor of Baseball Cards magazine. So I was the editor of Baseball Cards magazine, Fantasy Baseball magazine, and I was worried. I mean, it was a lot on my plate. But 1992, we did 3 baseball issues. They all sold about 33%. And then the last issue, we decided to do a fantasy football issue. We put Randall Cunningham on the cover. And I mean, it was like the SI swimsuit issue. People were writing to us saying, this is ridiculous. This is blasphemy. It's called Fantasy Baseball Magazine. How can you put a football guy on? Well, guess what? That issue, I think, sold about 47%. And we realized football was king. We were then going to go in 1993 to 2 baseball and 2 football. And that became the model that really survived and did very well after that. So things started to pick up after that. I joined Labor in 1994. If anybody knows what that is, you know, it's the first experts league. In fact, this year will be our 30th anniversary of Labor. This is going to be my last year in Labor, but it's just been a ride and a half, man. 30 years of doing that. In 1994, I was also interviewed by Good Morning America with Daniel Okrent. We were on there with Charles Gibson talking about how big fantasy baseball was getting. 1995, I started writing for ESPN.com. I was their first fantasy freelance writer. In fact, Rob Neyer hired me in 1995 to do fantasy basketball. We were the only ones out there with a fantasy basketball issue. So I did that. Then I did baseball. Then I did football. They asked us to do basketball and hockey. I mean, it was crazy, but ESPN was looking for writers at that time. So it was pretty cool. In 1998, I became a founding member of the FSPA, Fantasy Sports Players Association. We're trying to protect the players because companies were going under and taking the prize money, not paying it out. So we were concerned about that, and we helped form that first trade association. Then in 2000, I started the Fantasy Sports Trade Conference. It was so successful, we started doing 2 a year, one in March and one in August. So things were really picking up. I was getting deeper and deeper in the fantasy space, and I kind of had a reputation in the fantasy space. Then, of course, 9/11 came, right? My son was born 4 days later on September 15th. And my wife, that was our third child. They were 6, 2, and newborn. My wife decided to retire, cutting our salaries in half, unfortunately. But it was tough. Nobody wanted to travel after 9/11. The trade conference in March, we held at the Boardwalk Casino in 2002. And I had Tug McGraw speak and I had Vita Blue speak. We only had 55 people show up, which is about half of what we had the year before. The August trade conference, we had Lee Ivory from USA Today Baseball Weekly come speak. We also had Johnny Unitas at a card show we were running in Chicago. We had Dan Marino, John Elway. I mean, it was just fantastic. 55 people showed up. In August of 2002, Baseball Cards magazine folded. The magazine industry was just struggling. And I honestly thought my career was coming to an end. I mean, I really did. It just didn't look good. And I'm the breadwinner now, and it was a tough time in 2002. That deserves a drink. But what happened in 2002 September, the World Championship of Fantasy Football was hosting an event at MGM Grand. And they advertised in our magazine. And I told our ad manager, get cash for that ad because this thing is not flying. This was a time in the industry was free, was all over the place. People were giving free and trying to get advertising on their websites. And all of a sudden you have guys who are coming in with a $1,250 entry fee, win 200,000, fly to Las Vegas, and we'll host your drafts there. I thought I had no chance in hell. I honestly thought I had no chance in hell. And a industry buddy invited me there to come see it and to help out. One of his customers wasn't going to be able to show up, and I could sit in for him as a proxy. There was also going to be a draft on Friday night at the ESPN zone. Brady Tinker was supposed to be in it. He couldn't make it, so I was going to be his proxy in that. So I get to the ESPN zone. There's 900 plus people there. They've rented out the outside and the inside. They're on the Brooklyn Bridge drinking, and everybody is just having a blast, and everybody's just talking about the draft. During the draft, if you made a bad pick, they just booed the hell out of you. I mean, I could hardly wait to get out of there because I was getting booed so much. So the next day, it starts at 11 o'clock at MGM Grand. And if you've ever been there, the convention center is way down on the end, past the casino, the hotel, it's way down. And everybody's walking down these halls and everybody's got their jerseys on, right? Their favorite jersey, football. Everybody's got magazines. Nobody's got laptops, that's for sure. Everybody's got magazines and they're all fired up. And we get down there early and I'm standing and the room's not ready yet. So the doors are shut. And I mean, there's 900 people standing outside waiting. It's about 5 to 11, and they still haven't opened the doors yet. They finally opened the doors, and as far as the eye could see was just draft tables and boards all over. And people were just hooting and hollering. The guy in front of me said, "This is the effing Super Bowl of fantasy football." And I said, "You're right. This is the effing Super Bowl of fantasy football." I was amazed that they were able to do this. 46 leagues, 552 teams. My eyes just bugged out. And it was tough to run. I mean, Emil and Lenny were not public people, so they had somebody else speak for them beforehand. It didn't start till about 11:30, but nobody cared. They flew all the way out here to go do this, so nobody cared that it was late. The facilitators were not good. The first pick was like, I think, Marshall Falk, and they didn't know what position he was at and stuff. But honestly, nobody cared. And the U's were just 6 tables one way and then 6 tables the other way. You were just looking across from somebody. So it wasn't spread out or anything, but it was still so damn cool. And honestly, Lenny Papano, Emil Cadillac, you should be in the FSDA Hall of Fame for creating the high stakes market. You did. You created a high stakes market. Some of us saw that and kind of took the lead after that. But oh my God, what you guys did. They had the lunch break after round 10, and they had a buffet out in the hallway area, and Emil was there. And I came up to Emil. I knew Emil Cadillac because he did magazines. I did magazines. We're competitors. And I came up to him and I said, "Emil, this is unbelievable. You know I have a reputation in baseball. You know we can do this together in baseball. I would love to partner with you." And he said, "Yeah, sounds good. We can talk later. I don't have time right now. We can talk later." And as I walked away, he was looking at the buffet and I heard him say, "They're taking 3 sodas." And what he meant by that was he's paying for everything. He knows he's losing money, and now he's losing even more money because people are taking extra sodas. And I felt for him because the pressure was all in his face. Him and Lenny did this on their own dime, took a beating that first year, but then by the second year, they sold it out and it was fantastic. But that's what I wanted to do. I knew it right there that that's what I wanted to do. And so I talked to Lenny Papano. We got along really well and we talked about it. I said, "I'd be interested in doing it." He said, "We don't know anything about baseball, but we'd love to work with you." I said, "I'll write the rules." So he said, "Fine, get back to me." So in October, Ron Chandler invited me to come to the AFL symposium and to speak on the the fantasy baseball industry because I was the president of the FSPA. And we were fighting the Players Association over stats. They felt we needed to get licensed to use their stats. So it was a big, big thing back then. And he asked me to speak. And while I was there, I talked to a couple of guys about this idea of a high stakes baseball event that I was going to do with the World Championship of Fantasy Football. But I didn't want to make it easy. You know, Labor was 12 teams AL only, 12 teams NL only. I didn't want to do a 12-team mixed contest. So I asked Charlie Wiegert. He was doing 14 teams with CDM. He said 14 teams would be good. was talking to John Zaleski of Ultimate Fantasy Sports. He did 16 teams. So I thought I didn't like either one of those. I kind of thought 15 was half of the 30 MLB teams. If you could get half of the teams, half of the players, you know what? That would be kind of difficult, but not too difficult. So on the plane ride home, I wrote the rules. I wrote them all there, 15 teams. Got to be 5x5. Labor was 4x4, and I knew that wasn't right. Had to be 5x5. 23 starters, 6 reserves, no DL, $1,000 fab. I also wanted no minimum innings pitch limit. If they were going to tank, strikeouts and wins, they weren't going to win the overall. So that was it. I wrote it all down. I sent it to Lenny. He liked it. We thought about a $100,000 grand prize, which was half of WCUFF. They had a $200,000 grand prize. $12.50 entry fee, just like theirs. We're only going to go for 20 leagues. I would host it at the Rio after the trade conference. I'd get the space. So it sounded great. We agreed to it. We had kind of had a talk about how would we fit in with football. They already had invested all the money. That probably wasn't going to work out, but for the time being, we said, let's keep talking and working together. I gave it to my boss. At the time, Krause Publications was an ESOP company. We were an employee stock ownership program, which meant the employees owned 100% of the company. Chet Krause never wanted the company to move from Iola. So when he sold the company, he sold it back to the employees, and we became the owners of the company. We were a national ESOP company because our model was so good. So I gave it to my boss, and we were always encouraged to get new revenue for the company, right? So my boss didn't get back to me. And he didn't get back to me for a month. And Lenny and Emil kept asking me, what about this? What about this? We got to get going on this. I couldn't figure out why they were stonewalling me, but I could not get a response from my boss. And so Lenny said, actually, it was Emil, said, we're doing it without you. We're just going to do it. And I said, well, those are my rules, but what can I do? They won't reply to me, so I can't work with you guys. So they decided to launch the World Championship of Fantasy Baseball in 2003. I got the space for them at the Rio. They held it at the Rio. The trade conference was pretty successful in 2003. Their baseball only got 45 teams. I think they had like a $25,000 grand prize. They lost money on it, but I came down there. I looked at it. They had ran it pretty well, and they ran the whole year on the software and everything. So I was disappointed, but I was glad that somebody at least used my rules and were trying it out. And I just could not figure out why my company stonewalled me on this, and I never did find out. Finally, in the summer, I found out that Krause Publications was being sold to a company called F&W Publications for $250 million. Now, you'd think I'd be happy about that because I got a lot of money. We had 400 plus employees who split up $250 million. And so I didn't like it, though, because I didn't want to move. I had a family there. We liked the school system. We had a nice house. And it just didn't turn me on. I was not happy about it. But that was the reason why they couldn't take on new ventures. And that's what they told me. Now, the new company wanted more revenue. So they said, go forward with the NFBC. Why don't you try it? So I said, all right. And honestly, that's how I came up with the name. They were the World Championship of Fantasy Baseball. Well, we don't need to conquer the world. We're just going to be the National Fantasy Baseball Championship. And we kind of wanted the red, white, and blue and, kind of the shield like the NFL had. And so, it was the National Fantasy Baseball Championship. So off we were running, right? I had the game plan, even though they had used it. I'm using my rules. They are my rules. I needed software, though. And so who could I partner with on this? And I talked to some people at USA Today. Rod Beaton had written for me. He got me in contacts with there. We flew out to McLean, Virginia, and I met with their management. And they loved the idea, but their lawyers said it was gambling. So they couldn't do it with us. They just could not do it. I didn't know where to turn next. The next place was I was hosting the trade conference in Chicago in August. And we drove down and met with Stats Inc. because we were getting our stats for our magazines from them. Had to sign a new contract and stuff. And I gave them this idea. I asked if they were interested. Maybe we could partner together. They said no, that wasn't what they do. And they didn't really want to get involved with that. So I was bummed. The next morning, though, I get to the first tee and I'm teeing with Steve Bird, my good friend from Stats. And he says, we're in. We can do it for you. We've got the game software. We run a game for Turner Sports. We could run this one game format for you, and we'll build the website for you. He gave me an estimate that was fair, and we said, deal's done. We're going to do it. So I was so pumped. This was what I wanted to do. I had StatSync that was building the website. They did a good job. Their engine looked good enough for us. So I went back to the AFL symposium the next year, 2003, this is October, and Ron allowed me to announce it there. I didn't know what kind of reception I would get, but when I got done talking, Gene McCaffrey and John Mena came up to me. They said, "We're in. Vegas, count us in." So I thought I got 1 out of 300 sold. Can't be too hard, right? So the idea was to bring the live high stakes events to you. I would host it in New York. I would host it in Las Vegas. I would host it in Chicago. There was no online at that time, but instead of having everybody fly to Las Vegas, I felt I could do it regionally and do well. Little did I know it was going to be harder than that. So we get the site up, we got the message boards up. I'm trying to promote it. Our magazine doesn't come out till January-ish, and I'm getting no signups. And finally, in early December, we had memorabilia at the office because we had a memorabilia company, I had an autographed Alex Rodriguez baseball. I said, first person to sign up gets this Alex Rodriguez baseball. And shortly after, Ray Diaz out of Miami, Florida, takes a main event, my first official sign up. Now, he wanted the A-Rod baseball, but he also wanted to play high stakes. And Ray is still a customer today. He was in Las Vegas for football, and it's just fabulous that Ray Diaz was our first official sign up because he's still with us today. But nobody else signed up for a while. And one night, I was writing my ESPN column at the office, and there was a guy on the message boards and asked if he could call me. And I said, yes, it was Ken Bales. And he said that he was part of a group called Leaderboard Sports. And they played all these games on ESPN.com, and they would play baseball, football, fantasy fishing, NASCAR, golf, everything. And they had a really good group of guys, and they played in WCOFB the year before, and they were interested in playing in NFBC. I said, that's great. I said, what does it take? He said, why don't you talk to a guy by the name of Dave Kashard, who was div on our message boards? I said, absolutely. So I called up Dave, and we had a great conversation. We hit it off, and he said they played WCOFB, but these guys would like to do even more. They would do both even. And in fact, Meatloaf was in Leaderboard Sports, and he had drafted live with the WCOFB the year before, and he would do both of them for sure. Well, I knew Meatloaf. I had interviewed him in 1998. He played Prodigy. He was one of the biggest fantasy players on Prodigy, and I put it in Fantasy Baseball magazine. And I thought that would be just unbelievable to have Meatloaf drafting live with us. So sure enough, I talked to Div. They ended up having, I think, 22 main event teams, and most of those guys came out to Las Vegas. Some of them came to New York, but a lot of them came to Las Vegas, including Meat. And we'll talk about Meat in a little bit. But so that got us going. That Leaderboard Sports really saved the day, and we started to get a few more signups. But at the Super Bowl in Houston in January 2004, Tom and I went there. We were working at the Super Bowl card show, and we had tickets to the game. That was the New England Panthers game, and we had tickets to the Super Bowl party. And my boss flew in the night before with his new girlfriend, took our Super Bowl tickets, took our party tickets, and that was a kick in the nuts for Tom and I. I mean, we're working our ass off trying to do things, and we couldn't even go to the game. And that day, we got our 69th sign up. I remember a sign up coming in on Super Bowl Sunday. It was Glenn Schroeder, but we only had 69 teams, but we just had to keep staying out there, keep saying we were going to guarantee the prize money. We had spots in Las Vegas, New York, and Chicago. I mean, we just couldn't get out of the contract, so we were going forward, and it was tough. In early April of 2004, I was flying to Phoenix for labor, and we had 148 signups, and I was so stressed. I knew we were going to lose a lot of money. And I've told this story before, but it's the honest to God truth. We were flying over the Rocky Mountains, and I had a window seat, and I just wanted that plane to crash right into the Rocky Mountains. I'm sorry for everybody that was on my flight, but I had so much stress. I did not want to land and have to deal with this anymore. It was just too much for me. I just wasn't sure how this was going to pan out. But when I landed, I had a voice message, and we didn't have cell phones back then. I called the office, I had a voice message, and it was Pete Lukowitz. And he had one team in New York, and he said him and Will Robertson were going to split up teams and take separate teams if that would help me. And I was like, that gets us to 149. If I could get 11 leagues, maybe we could salvage this a little bit. And sure enough, the signups came in over that last week. We ended up with 195 teams, 13 leagues. We filled 3 auction leagues, 2 in Las Vegas, 1 in New York. And the live events went smoothly. Meat was fantastic. He did the NL auction and had a great time. He did with Kenny Baez, actually. And he came in with his own munchies, his own liter of soda, and he just had a blast. And at the main event, he was in Las Vegas League One, sat next to Nate Ravitz, and just had a blast. And everybody at the live events had a good time. And Brady was our auctioneer, and it was the first time he ever did an auction. And he was just terrible to start out. He was too slow. He went on, and I had to pull him aside. And basically, I just gave him one advice: you're in charge here. When you say sold, it's sold. And you got to speed it up. You got to put pressure on these guys to make their beds. And from that point on, Brady just became the best auctioneer, and he just took charge. And he's been to every single one of our events since. So it's just been fantastic. So we lost tens of thousands of dollars, and that unfortunately does not deserve a drink. But we went forward with football. We had 224 teams, and I'll tell the story about that one later. But we lost tens of thousands of dollars there too, and that does not deserve a drink either. But I'm taking one anyways because after doing baseball and football, we lost well over $100,000, and I'm with a new company, and they're not happy. But it was a startup, and any new startup takes 3 years to break even usually. And so they were patient. My boss said, one more time. You've got one more chance, and that's it. And I said, thanks. That's all I could ask for is one more chance. And so then 2005 NFBC, we did the same thing. New York, Las Vegas, Chicago. We sold all 300 main event teams. We added 650 auction leagues, and we did those in all 3 cities, including Chicago. Did 1250 auction leagues. And in Las Vegas, we went from the trade conference at the Rio to the baseball, and we had 9 main event leagues at one time, and that was fantastic. I mean, that was really, really good. And so then football had a very, very good year as well. The main event has sold out for 18 straight years, and there was no looking back. I mean, after 2005, nobody ever gave us a hassle. We made money. It wasn't a whole lot of money, but we continued to make money. In 2005, I think we did second chance leagues, and then 2006 we added some satellite leagues. Those were our first online drafts with stats. We added Tom full-time within our division. Tom was running Chicago for a while. He was helping me with the magazines, but we weren't big enough for both of us to be working on the high stakes division at that time. But in 2006, then Tom and I took over full-time, the both of us. And I told Tom I needed him. He was doing the online drafts and doing that. I had 3 kids. It was very, very difficult for me. But we really started to take off. And 2008, we actually partnered with NBC Sports. Rick Wolf, a good friend of mine, was working there. But it took so long for legal to get approval on this that it was too late for baseball. We worked with Roto World for football. They just didn't deliver the signups. They're free content. I get it. High stakes is a big jump for somebody getting free. So that's why we started the online championship in 2009. It was actually a way to try and get Roto World people to get into high stakes at a 350 price point. And 350 just seemed like the right price point. I think we had a $10,000 grand prize, and it was still tough to get them in. But Lindy Hinkleman won the 2009 NFBC Online Championship and the main event. He won a $75,000 bonus. So we were off and running. I mean, we parted ways with NBC Sports in 2009, but we were off and running at that point. We had some online drafts now, and now we're really going with the online championship. So here's a critical point. June 5th of 2009, it's actually my 20th anniversary. I come into work, And I no sooner sit down and my boss says he needs to see me in his office. When we were owned by Krause, we used to always honor the how many years you were working at the company with donuts or cookies or whatever. I thought they were going to give me something as a present for my 20th anniversary working there. Little did I know, I get in there and it's the F&W president behind my publisher. And they say, and Tom's in there with me, and they say, guys, we're selling your division and you. And I said, huh, in the 21st century, you can do that? And he looked me squarely in the eyes and he said, yes, we can. And I said, oh, okay. And I knew who it was. I said, I do not want to work for Ryan Houston. He said, you don't even know who's buying it. I said, I know who's buying it. I had a feeling CDM and Liberty Media had been looking at us for a while, and I did not want to work there. I had been talking with people who wanted to buy us, and I could tell that our new ownership was not behind what we were doing. But they made the deal, and they said that we were part of it. But we had to sign non-compete clauses with Liberty, and I refused to do that. And Tom followed my lead. And I just said I would not do a non-compete. That if I left this company after a couple of years, that I couldn't work in the fantasy sports industry after I have 20 plus years of a great reputation and stuff. So we walked out. We did not sign the contract. Liberty still bought the company without us. And then I did get a lot of phone calls from Ryan, and I thought it through, and I called some people, and I just said, F it. I'm just going to sign the damn thing. And it was 6 years of working on this high stakes contest. I didn't want to walk away from it. So I backed down and I signed it. And that was that. They allowed us to stay up in Iola. We would go down to St. Louis every once in a while, but now we had to build software. So we launched 2010 NFBC with CDM and Liberty. And it was Ryan's idea to do 2 weekends of live events. And I didn't like it at first because we had everybody drafting at the same time in all cities, exactly at the same time. Everybody could only have one contest. But you could see what was happening. Our competitors were starting to think about doing 2 different times. And it just made sense to allow off multiple dates and times. So that started in 2010. We hosted baseball at the Bellagio, and we actually had 11 leagues at once in the Grand Ballroom. It was fabulous. We hosted our first Diamond League, $10,000 entry fee league. We had masseuses from the poker room come on up there and give guys massages during it. There was so much pressure. I mean, it was just fantastic. So it turned out really good. Unfortunately, our software was a disaster. And the first night of the season, as you'll remember, Cincinnati used to host on Sunday night, and then the games would start on Monday. Our first fab was that Sunday night, and it just blew up. It was terrible. It didn't process correctly. We had to have everybody rerun it. Everybody saw what the winning bids were. It gave them time to change their bids. We asked people to be honest and not do that. It was just terrible. When the standings came out, they had ERA and WHIP with the most points. If you had the most highest ERA and WHIP, it was a disaster. And people came down on me because I said I trusted our software, but it was bad. It was bad. And we made it through football and we made it through baseball, but Liberty was not happy with us, and it was not good. So I had heard that Liberty was interested in selling in December, and Ryan had told me, and I thought, I don't want this to fold. I'm interested in buying it back. And so I had told Liberty that I'd be interested in buying it back. So on January 5th, 2011, Liberty Media announced that they were shutting down the CDM offices. Okay. Liberty Media had gotten involved with this because they bought Fanball and CDM. CDM had started the first DFS game, to be truthful. I think it was called Snapdraft. It just didn't take off, but they thought that this was going to be big. DFS. Honestly, if they would have stayed in it another year, maybe it would have taken off. FanDuel came in after them, and then DraftKings, and they just took off. But Liberty just could not take it anymore. I think they were fed up with the management, and they wanted to get out. But they didn't want any of the contests to have a hard fall. They wanted them to succeed. And so on that day, January 5th, they reached out to me and asked if I wanted to buy the high stakes division. I said, yes, I would. So what happened was my non-compete clause came back to help me. In that clause, if they fired me or if they got rid of me, they owed me several months of my salary. And so I said I would use part of that to pay for the contest, and they were more than thrilled about that. They did not want to have a big cash outlay on this. And so they gave me a price which was very fair. I rated all my kids' savings accounts. I rated our savings account. I sold some stock and I bought it. And we had already started draft champions leagues. We had a lot of drafts and we had money already that was going to have to come back to us. And we did not want to miss a beat in baseball. So I quickly called my friend Steve Bird at Stats and asked him if he was interested not in being just uh, working for us, but to buy it. I did not want to own this by myself. I did not have the income at that time to guarantee all the prizes and everything. So I asked if we could sell the Stats, and they were more than interested at that point. So honestly, that was really the only way I could continue to move without a hitch. Stats had all the history, they had everything that made it look like a seamless transition, and they were my first choice. They did not pay me a lot for it. I did not make money off of the deal, but I did not lose money. And again, we were able to move forward. And I felt they were a really good partner. I could trust all of those guys. So that's the way I went in 2011. In 2011, as you know, the NFL strike happened as well. WCOFF folded, they went bankrupt, and that was a wild time. So we moved into football to do 2 weekends. We had always avoided their weekend, but we moved into their weekend then and hosted as well. And we grew each year with Stats. Like I said, in the Diamond League started in 2010. We started the Platinum League in 2014 for both baseball and football. And then Stats was sold in 2015. As always happens with me, someone gets greedy and has to sell the company. And unfortunately, my boss, Steve Bird, left the company in 2015, went to Sport Radar in 2016, really made it tough for Stats. He took a lot of their business away from them. And in 2016, you could tell that Stats was no longer ready to be in the consumer market. They had their hands full with Sport Radar. So I reached out to them, said, I know this isn't what you want to do for a living. I would like to buy it back. I made an offer, but they said, we have a better offer from somebody else. I said, I know who that is. And it's Rob from Sports Hub Technologies. And they said yes. And they took his offer. And I knew Rob very well, and we had talked an awful lot. Even when Liberty bought, Rob was interested in buying us. And I knew we could work together. So it was fine. The only thing is, we didn't have software there again. So we would have to build our own software again. And we'd have to do it with some of the CDM guys down there. Now, the two guys I trusted, John Bryson and John Jokum, were still there, so I felt better there. And Stats allowed us to use their platform for a full year. So for 2017, we stayed on the Stats platform. Then we moved over to the Sports Hub platform in 2018, and it got off to a rocky start. There were people who were mad at me because I said it was going to be fine. We got off to a rocky start, but we continued to improve it, got better and better. I mean, right now, it's no doubt the best software in the industry. Our Fab software is unbelievable. Our draft room, these guys listened to us. We'd fly down to St. Louis. We built the draft room that everybody wanted. Then we got public ADPs. I mean, we've done so much in the last 6 years with Sports Hub Technologies. That's just been fantastic. So we added guillotine leagues. We added online auction software. We added keeper leagues. The Diamond Challenge came over with us. We added gladiator leagues this year. Our grand prizes got bigger and bigger. And like I said, last year we had over 40,000 teams and we gave out over $10 million in prize money. This year we're budgeted to give away over $11 million in prize money. So we've got a really solid team right now, and I'm really proud to be part of the Sports Hub Games Network. And that does deserve a spotted cow. One thing I'll say though is in 2020, the COVID year aged me in dog years. I mean, we had a record year set up. We had locations in all three cities sold out. And then March 13th, right? Tom and I are in New York City, and it's like Zombieville. They're telling us to all to get out of there. Doesn't matter about your contract. I'll rip it up, she says. I don't want you guys here. Get out, she said. And it was just crazy. And then, of course, they didn't decide to negotiate a deal until it was late in July, and it was just brutal. And then 2021 was tough. And 2022, the MLB lockout was even worse. And so it's just been 3 really, really tough years. But we made tough decisions, and I think we made good decisions all the way around. Even this year, we had the week 17 problem, right? On Monday night, we had to make a tough decision. I think we made the right decision. So it's been 19 glorious years. It's been 19 hard years. It's been 19 fun years. Uh, but I think the NFBC and NFFC is set up for a long, long tenure, and I'm looking forward to what's coming on next. And I'm certainly here for the 20th anniversary season. I'm really looking forward to baseball and football this year. I was the editor of Fantasy Baseball Magazine for 20 years, so doing this for 20 years seems apropos, and I kind of like it. The best thing about the NFBC and NFFC, though, is the camaraderie and the friendships made. You know, I know some of you guys, you talk to these guys every day. You've become friends with NFBC, NFFC guys. They're your best friends in the world, and it was all created here. And I love that. I just love that. I love it as well. Some of you guys are my best friends as well. And I just love the camaraderie, and it's what keeps me going. I mean, without the live events, I wouldn't do this. Anybody could run online, but it's the live events that I love the best. And what we do together in Las Vegas and New York, it's fabulous. It's like family reunions. It really is. And it's just fantastic. If you've never been to a live event, come. You may not know anybody, but by the end of the time, when you leave there, you'll know names, you'll know people, you'll get emails and text messages, and it'll be camaraderie. Trust me. Phil Dussault, ask him. You know, as a shy guy, came to New York, made him like family there. He wins everything, right? Comes to Las Vegas. He's like a king out there. And he admits it's so great. The camaraderie is so great. So come join us if you can. Speaking of camaraderie, you know, it was me and Tom for the first 15 or so years. And I mean, watching the online drafts, doing the live. We were putting out magazines, many magazines for the first 7 years. And then when we came to Sports Hub, Rob didn't really even ask us if we needed help. All of a sudden, one day, this guy named Derek Butcher was working for us. And I'll tell you how we met Derek. They asked us to come to Minneapolis in November of 2016 to meet the team. So Tom and I drove there. They took us out to eat. It was a Monday night game. We're watching football. And a guy across from us, they said, is Derek Butcher. And I looked at it and I knew he was playing with us. In fact, he was in the top 20 in a couple of teams in our football online championship. I knew he had 20 some teams. And I always thought his last name was Boucher. I thought he was French, Derek Boucher. And I said, don't you play with us? He said, yeah, I can't do that anymore now I'm working with you guys. And I'm like, holy shit, Tom, how are we going to replace his 22 leagues? I don't want him working for us. But he was working in accounting. And then in 2007, Rob all of a sudden put him on our staff and we had to put him to work. And next thing you know, Derek is, part of the team and fit in like a glove with us. He's doing all the online stuff. He's giving us some ideas, really adding to what Tom and I were doing and making our lives a lot easier. And then we added Brian Bolf in 2021 because even the three of us couldn't keep up with all the leagues. I mean, when you got like 15,000 online drafts or teams, I should say, it's crazy. Over 1,400 online drafts. It's just crazy. So Brian's been a big addition as well. So that's all been great. I'm going to wrap up here, but I do want to talk a little bit about the creation of some of our contests. The online championship, like I told you, was started by me to try and get the Roto World people playing at a smaller price point. And again, it was $350. It was a $10,000 grand prize. The baseball sold out. I think we went up to 30,000 for football because we thought it would take off. And it was so bad. I mean, Ryan gave me some autographed pictures of Larry Fitzgerald. And if you signed up, I would mail one of those to you. It was bad. But then at the last minute, it just filled up like crazy and we sold it out. And so the online championship now is a $150,000 grand prize in baseball, $250,000 in football. And competitors have stolen our idea. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And used that 12-team, 20 round for football and grown it bigger than we have. But the online championship, I'm proud of that because it was really a smart move for us to move off of the high stakes and to bring more people into this. The Draft Champions is a really cool story. So we started working with mockdraftcentral.com with the magazine because they had ADPs. And so, yeah, I was doing a top 200, but all of a sudden, Mock Draft Central has ADPs of mock drafts. And I thought that was fabulous. Well, there was a company called Ant Sports that was doing draft and hold leagues for I think like $5, $10, $20. This guy would always come to the trade conference and he'd always ask questions and stuff. And I didn't really understand it because he was paying out like 92 to 95%. So one year, I think it was 2008, might have been 2009, KJ Duke called me up and asked if I wanted to do something like them where there'd be a draft and hold. Guys could practice before the main event, but not have to do fab during the year. They would just draft, they would manage their roster, but not have to do fab. I thought, that's a good idea. That's worth a drink. And I liked the format. And so the first year, I think we did it 15 teams, 45 rounds. And I remember we did really well on that. I think we sold it out. And at the end of it, Sean said to me, Sean Childs, that's not enough rounds. We got to go 50. Everybody was short on catchers. I'm like, what? I'm like, okay, that's all right. We've got the software. We can do that. So we were doing this with stats in 2009. And the draft champions has just been fabulous. In fact, it killed Mock Draft Central, killed mock drafts to be truthful. And now everybody wants to do draft and holds, and they're just very, very popular. This year, the guillotine leagues, I mean, that was just insane how those took off. So that was good. We did the gridiron. KJ also came up with the idea with the gridiron and the contract leagues for baseball. And again, those were live events where people were actually bidding with their own money for draft spots. That was a good one. The cut line league was really, really interesting. There was a company called Fantasy Football Online Championship that had $1 million grand prize in 2009, I think it was. In 2010, Chad Schroeder finished second. Shane Schroeder finished first. It involved Jerry Rice. They had it at the Bellagio, the finals and everything. But it was more like a 10-team league, and there were survivors, so you got through the cut line. And it was a good format, but these guys lost so much money in the first 2 years, they were going under. And I actually asked to partner with them on the third year. We could do it on our format and such, and they were like, no, we're going to keep doing this. And so I kind of modeled the cut line from the FFOC, not exactly, but it was kind of that model. And Stats just would not build that software for me. I think it took 3 years before we finally built that software. And then right away, the cut line was very popular. And it got more popular in football when we allowed best ball scoring for the first 9 weeks. So that was the cut line, was kind of an idea that I saw from FFOC. Silver Bullet came from the customers. Great idea that people brought to Derek. And so a lot of our ideas for contests came from customers. Silver Bullet, one entry for football. I would still love to do a single entry for baseball. Vlad Sedler and I talked about this at the AFL. It just was not received well by the baseball people. I tried 2 years in a row, and I don't know. Somebody's going to have to tell me that makes sense in baseball for me to do it again. But the Silver Bullet is very popular, and I like that one. So finally, the future of fantasy sports. Here's my take on it. Take it from an old guy who's been around in this industry for 34 years now. I think pay-to-play fantasy sports has a short lifeline. It could have a long one. I mean, NFBC and NFFC could last for another 20 years. And I hope you look at this tape 20 years from now and make fun of me. But right now, the state-by-state licensing is so hard. We're exempting 10 states right now from playing in our contests because the states won't allow us to be licensed there, or the licenses are too high. Ontario, for instance, just allowed legalized sports betting last year. Would not even offer licenses to fantasy companies. FanDuel and DraftKings aren't licensed there for fantasy. That makes no sense. Fantasy sports does not compete with legalized sports betting. But the legislators don't get it. They're legislating our industry and they don't understand our industry. It's insanity. And so this happened in Connecticut, same thing. Delaware, I believe, will license you but the fee is $75,000. Do they know how many people play fantasy sports in Delaware? Not 75,000 worth. And so it's getting tougher and tougher. In fact, you do not see competitors to us in FFPC and RT Sports because the barrier to entry is so high. You would need to get licensed in the 18 states that we're licensed in right now. And when more states, maybe California, maybe Texas, maybe Florida, when they legalize sports betting, they may kick out fantasy sports as well. When that happens, that's the end. When you lose big states like that, that's the end. And so we need people to tell their legislators to stop this. We're not doing anything illegal. We want to be licensed, make it fair for us. But as we keep losing states, it gets tougher and tougher for us to make this business work. I mean, we're guaranteeing prizes, and during the year, we're exempting states. So I love the future of fantasy sports, but I'm very worried about it. And again, I hope 20 years from now, I will not be working in this job 20 years from now, I guarantee you. Uh, I hope that it's still being run by Derek or somebody else, and I hope it's doing well. But it'll only do well if these states wisen up and leave us alone. Let us run these businesses. We have never defaulted on any contest, and we never will. And we always will pay back 80+%. All of our contests, our national contests, are based on 80% before discounts, and we're still paying six figures a year in licensing fees. So I hope people understand what we have to go through to just be in your states and to make this legal. So again, happy anniversary. Our 20th anniversary NFBC live events are going to be epic in New York and Las Vegas. Come to the Mirage. It's going to be a party. We have a Friday night party with MTM in a special location at the Mirage. It's going to be cool. And New York City, I hope we get together on Thursday night somewhere before the weekend of drafts and auctions. It's going to be a blast. So let's do this because I think it's going to be really, really special this year. It's 20 years. It's awesome. Cheers to you, my spotted cow. Thanks, everyone. And on Thursday, I'm interviewing 2020 NFBC main event overall champion, Bobby Kramatula. Big Bob's going to join me on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the High Stakes Fantasy Network. See you then, everyone. Thanks for joining.